Hello, so this is the information presentation. And let's start with this chart that I've flipped sideways. Starting costs, I'll put it the right way up for you. Starting costs, minimum wages compared. Now these are wages compared in US dollars at PPP, which is purchasing power parity. So leveled out as much as we can level them out. And you can see Argentina is quite expensive for the minimum wage. Now, obviously, they don't have to use the minimum wage, but it's what's in this chart. Korea, Poland, Hungary, Chile, South Africa, now we're starting to get really quite cheap. Brazil, Russia, China, Mexico, Indonesia, India, and Nigeria. Okay. And over there on the grey ones, they're the Western world type people. France, ridiculously expensive in comparison. Heck of a minimum wage here. The US, Greece, and Japan as comparisons for the emerging markets, just to give us an idea about wages and what you might have to pay in various places. Wages aren't everything, but they're a good place to start when making a calculation of where to build some stuff. Right. The FT gives us Brazil's states are in a tax war to win iPad production. So the Apple Corporation has the choice to make of where to build their popular iPads, and we note that boasting a few transport links with the outside world, other than the airport and the Amazon River, Manaus would today be a backwater were it not for tax breaks that has turned it into the jungle version of a Chinese free trade zone. Now, I was going to go on more about this, but there's the next link saying it's a $12 billion plan to produce iPads. And the third link here to see is Manaus's tax breaks were given to them in history due to things that it's 35% cheaper to build it up the Amazon than anywhere else. But where is it about other areas basically are fighting Manaus for the honour and privilege of building those iPads by putting their tax rates down as well. There's a great inner Brazilian battle going on for who can put their tax rates down. And it's nothing that we don't know about. We know about our counties, localities, states, towns and cities that are willing to give these people tax breaks to lure them in. Even countries are not one unit that all works together for the greater good. They're all fighting internally against each other. Right. Quickly moving on to Project Syndicate and the water hegemon about China. It's a whole different subject. It just happens to be another brick, but it's another subject. And written from New Delhi, international discussions about China's rise has focused on its increasing trade muscle, growing maritime ambitions and expanding capacity to project military power. One critical issue, however, usually escapes attention: China's rise as a hydro-hegemon with no modern historical parallel. And as we move forward, this water thing is going to be dreadfully expensive. Yeah, expensive, but important to everybody. Water appears to be popping up not quite in the right places for everyone's liking. No other country has ever managed to assume such an unchallenged riparian, I had to look that up, preeminence on a continent by controlling the headwaters of multiple international rivers and manipulating their cross-border flows. China, the world's biggest dam builder, with slightly more than half of the approximately 50,000 large dams on the planet, is rapidly accumulating leverage against its neighbours by undertaking massive hydro engineering projects on transnational rivers. And we can say that that was all part of their planning when they went into places like Tibet. Right, let's move on. This is China again and rare earth metals. Rare earths. Rare earths. Are they rare earth metals or rare earths? Mental block. This chart is showing us other on the bottom, which is purple, the United States, which is the light blue area, and then red. In the past, the United States used to be the world's big boy on the block for rare earths. But due to the fact it got very expensive to dig them up and process them and get them to market due to pollution controls, etc., China has basically taken off and taken over completely. It's not that the rare earths are that rare. They're not. They can be found in places like the United States, but it's not economically viable to dig them up and get them to market because it's such dirty stuff and dirty and difficult and therefore costly to get them there. That is why China has got the monopoly on rare earths, not because they're rare. They're not rare. Well, they're quite rare, but not very rare. Like, you think the only places to get them is in China. That's not true. The cheapest place to get them is China. Right. Gulf news. Saudi oil, Saudi energy demand to double by 2028. Currently, right, noting figures, more than 3 million barrels of the 8.3 million barrels produced a day are consumed by the domestic market. So in Saudi at the moment, they consume, munch, 3 out of the 8.3 that they produce. So they keep 3 and export 5.3. So Saudi Aramco, the sucker up of the oil, has forecast that the kingdom's daily energy demand in 2028 will reach 8.3. So on today's sucking up, there will be no exports. Saudi Arabia will use all of their sucking ups. The caption under the picture is Saudi Arabia, the country will focus on increasing use of solar energy. So they're going to try and make a lot more solar. So the projection in 2028 won't be 8.3. It might possibly be less. So they can export, so they can get money in. Because otherwise their economy is going to be very dubious. I would have thought anyway. Right. Global markets. I had to put this in because I've seen the video bouncing around of this wailing woman in wherever it was in America that got arrested for closing her account with Citigroup. Well, that's nothing. In Indonesia, a Citigroup customer was beaten to death. He went in to discuss about his overdraft, as it were, the loan that he'd taken out, and they used old-fashioned methods to convince him that paying it back would be a good idea, but rather overdid it, which only goes to show different methods are used in different countries. But I think Citigroup's quality control, or whatever they call it, international, are going to have to look into those sort of practices. Right, staying with the banks and banking sector leverage, this is an interesting chart on leverage because it gives us comparisons. US commercial banks right at the pretty pink bottom there, and the average banks have actually dropped their leverage in the last 10 years. Let's say a bit more than 10 years this chart goes out. Canada have been going up slightly. United Kingdom has bounced up lots and lots. The US investment banks, they're not investment banks anymore, but they're putting them in as investment banks like Goldman and Morgan Stanley, and they're coming down slightly, but from very elevated heights, similar now to the United Kingdom. They're normal banks, which are really down to Lloyds and RBS, and the Eurozone, and this is why the great panic is on. What the bloody hell is the Eurozone doing up there? Go up, come down. But it's the coming down that's going to be rather tricky. Okay, in the UK, this is the Guardian interactive chart showing how much the bailout, when the UK government bailed out their banks, well, Lloyds and RBS in this case, they came in as giving the banks capital. In other words, buying equity in the banks. So that's government money, which is the people's money. So how much are the people making or losing on the deal? And we can see that I've hovered over Lloyds, the blue one in this case. I mean, they were up at one time, but at the moment they just happen to be down overall by £10 billion. And the other one, RBS, down at the moment at £22 billion, making a total of £32 billion. And when I was young, £32 billion was money. Lots of it. And I think it still is. You can buy a lot of stuff for £32 billion. But it could well go up again. But it also is equally likely, probably more likely, that the government will have to put more of the people's money as equity capital into Lloyds and RBS and hope some more that it'll go up. And again, it probably won't. Paul Mason is marvellous for the BBC and marvellous for the world, doing his blogging and tweeting. And for Sunday's radio show, but never got to use them, he was asked to write 20 reasons why it's kicking off everywhere. Why all these riots and fuss and occupying places and everything. Why is it kicking off? So there are 20 reasons. I think this could be the update one. I think he's gone to 23 reasons now in the updates. What we have here is the reiteration of the why is it kicking off in Tunisia, Egypt, etc., and why occupying. And I've dug out what I think's the most important one, but if you read through them, and I recommend reading through them, obviously there are loads of that are important. They're all important, or he wouldn't have written them. But the one I've got here, which is worth talking of, is the French Revolution 1789 was not the product of poor people, but poor lawyers. And now this is important. Nobody gives a shit about the poor people. Never have and never will. And even poor people, when they do this revolting stuff out on the streets, they're just gunned down or swept aside. But when middle to, I don't know what the class, it's hard to talk class. In this case, it's lawyers. What we have in the Western world is our children, for decades now, have been going to universities and getting very well educated. And they're coming now out of education now with huge debts and very limited chance for jobs. But these people have the brains and the clout together to organise. When they go out on the streets, they have enough clout, especially if they're backed up by the poor proletariat, but it's them that when they get out on the streets will cause change. The poor never will cause change, but this is what we've got now. And was it expressed here? No, I'll say it because I've seen it elsewhere. It's the girls, the young women, that are now highly educated. They haven't got much pubic hair, and they haven't got much what they thought would be the future that they deserved for all the effort they've put in. And it's them that's behind this, basically. When you get highly educated young women, they will organise better than anybody. And they have been scorned, and they will not be knocked back. And they will get the highly educated boys, young men, and the poor people together to do something, and they will create something. They will get something done. I have no idea what it'll be, but they will not be pushed back. Right. Just to round this off as a bit of a prediction for the future, EU economy, Spain sees an exodus as the crisis deepens. I'd just like to put this in just to say that my mind is seeing a bit of the future in a mystical way, and what we're going to get is more of this bifurcation thing where countries like, let's say, United Kingdom, London will hold up, and people, the bright people, the people will be drawn to London. London will be all right, and the extremities will fall apart. Spain, because it's an extremity, it'll have bits in it, Barcelona and Madrid maybe, that hold up, but basically extremities like Ireland, Spain, Italy, extremities will a wedge is being driven in, they will go downwards and others will go upwards. There will be a choice made between who will succeed, what will succeed, where will succeed, and they will be all right. But pro rata, where the all right people can go up and hold their whatever they have, the people and places where it's decided are now persona non grata. They're out there. The non-chosen will go down. And people are not stupid. They have choice. They will go towards the successful and away from the unsuccessful, making the divide even more and more. And that way, inevitably, these small market choices by individual people will rip the world apart. Otherwise, things will be fine. Bye.